So you should be seeing a presentation now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sharp end of strategy. So we had a quick introduction, talked a bit about the previous session, okay, that took place a week ago. And I think what I'm doing here is quite complementary to that, okay? So there's like two approaches to strategy. There's the long one and then there's the short one. I advocate the short one. So my process is a process where within 4 weeks, you have your strategy, what I call the strategy on a page, which does not hinder you to then produce a longer document, which can then take longer. But what I do is I really get like the backbone of your strategy, and we do this in 4 workshops. To give you an idea of how this is, how quick we can do this, the quickest I did was, and I'm going to show you the results of that work. It's something we did with a company called, or an organization called Fashion Revolution. They had almost no budget. And we did really the very, very minimum. We did interview, 3 workshops over Zoom, and we got a basic structure of a strategy. So it shows that this process is robust enough to produce something within a very short time frame. This is a process I've been developing since, say, 2016. So I'm going to show you a document from 2016 where you will see the elements. I'm not using the same words there, but you will see that on the fundamental structure, this is a process I've been using for the last 5 years. I've been using it with commercial organizations and non-profit organizations. So let me start with a story, okay? Well, there was once upon a time an NGO looking for new funding. So that NGO was successful already. So they were already, not say in the market, but they were active for a while, and they had some funding, some initial funding. But what they wanted to do is they wanted to find new donors or get the existing donors to fund them for a next round. Okay, so they approached the donors that would support their cause. So there are many donors out there who really want to support organizations. But then the donors said, well, guys, we really like what you do. And we see that you're creating great results. But actually, what we would like to see before we move forward is we'd like to see a clear strategy. And of course, the NGO was a bit upset about this because they said, well, our strategy is clear, we know what we're doing and so, but the donor said, yeah, you know, we're not quite clear. We see that you're nice people, we see that what you're doing is of value to the world, but we're just not getting what exactly is your strategy. Okay, so that's as a starting point. So I will start with the question for you, and we will going to do this in breakout rooms, 2 breakout rooms. And I'm going to ask you the question, what makes a good strategy? And we're going to do this in 2 breakout rooms. Ideally, you don't mix. I think, Anna, you need to see that not the 2 of the same organization going.
Yeah, I'll do it manually.
I think the breakout room need to be mixed so that it's not Joel and Julia, because so we have a bit of a mix. Discuss in breakout rooms for 5 minutes. What, in your view, makes a good strategy? Okay, so see you back in 5 minutes.
Okay, I'll create the room.
What makes a good strategy? That's the question you need to answer or brainstorm together. So guys, what did you find out? What is the insight you got from the short conversation?
That strategy.
What makes a good strategy?
Good. I think the conversation that I had with my partner is that strategy is a kind of process that gets clear once we start conversation with our colleagues, with the members, and then we jot it down on the paper. And once we are in the process of execution, we keep coming back to that and see if we have deviated from that strategy that we have formulated or not. If we have, then what are the reasons? So yeah, and also like this clear formulation that will be run with the funders, donors.
Okay, so strategy as a guide to execution. So good strategy is a guide to execution. Okay, so that's one important element. And the other analysis, strategy is, you see strategy as a process. So strategy, the strategy formulation as a series of conversations to clarify actually what you're trying to achieve and how, no?
Yeah, that certainly came up with me and Rafa. And, you know, I think one of the points that we shared that we had a big overlap on is our organizations have different options to choose from. This is one of the challenges, and we don't have the resources to execute or focus on all of those options. So this strategy process will help us have conversations which narrow the options down and align the organization resources to that. So that's also one of our challenges.
Cool. So narrow down options, okay, and allow for focus, okay. So what I'm getting from what you're saying is you cannot focus on all you have many options. You cannot focus on all of them because you don't have all the resources. Even if you had all the resources, it would not be good to try to pursue everything. So it allows you to narrow down your options and to focus on them, and then to align your resources, an element of alignment and focusing and putting the resources on the best possible options.
Yeah, and I think just as I was listening to you say that back to us, another key element was, and I guess it's covered by the word align, is that we're all on the same page. I mean, at the moment, we all have so many different ideas on what those options could be, but this strategic process and the resulting document will hopefully bring that alignment and all of us onto the same page, so to speak. That would be a big success indicator, I think.
Okay. So a good strategy gets the team on the same page. Cool. What else? Who else wants to share? Kevin, what did you?
I think we also agree that, you know, it has to give direction. And Joel and myself also thought that there has to be a certain degree of flexibility so that it can react to changing environment and changing circumstances in a very uncertain world. I think the other thing we felt that it has to be sufficiently long-term so that it can guide the longer-term outcomes, and also to be clear in terms of the outcomes and the positive change that it hopes to drive. And I think the other thing we talked about was it has to be sufficiently high level and strategic as well. And it has to be differentiated from a task or a milestone, but you know, it has to be some sort of outcome driven end goal there. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so what I'm hearing here is actually strike a balance between, on the one side, have a long-term vision, so it provides you a direction. On the other hand, it should not be so static that you're just on rails. So you need to be able to adapt while not going all over the place just because something changed. Okay, so you don't want to be chasing rabbits. Okay, whoa, an opportunity here, an opportunity there, and so well, where's the team? Yeah, there's this great opportunity there, and so flexibility, adapting to environment, but clear about the outcome. So maintaining flexibility, still a clear direction. Sufficiently high level, yes, and long-term element, but still outcome-driven. So it's really a what in German we call Spannungsfeld. So it's really a different long-term, short-term, flexible high level outcome. So it needs to combine a few elements of it. Okay. Interesting. Thank you very much.
Just want to add to that, one of the things that was coming up for me while we were all discussing now what came out of our both discussions is how does strategy interact, or how is it interlinked perhaps with theory of change for the organization? Because I feel like, you know, your theory of change is sort of how the organization thinks that change happens in the world, or how it can help bring about change or produce it. So I was wondering how that may interact with strategy, because I completely agree on the need for flexibility, and especially with young organizations where it may not be defined to a very sort of detailed level. What is it that you do best, or what is it that should be your niche? Even when you think you have defined a niche, you start seeing that the niche actually has a lot of options within it. So how to, it needs to allow us to explore a bit, or like actually test whether those are the best options, and allow us to pivot if that is actually not, like, where we thought we were best placed to act is actually not, and it may be somewhere else. But again, without letting us chase rabbits every time something comes around.
You're mentioning something important I did not want to share in this presentation, but I will now that you've mentioned it. I think a good strategy has this element of an inherent logic into it, okay? Which is like, you don't see it in the, often it is in strategy documents. It's not in the strategy document I'm going to share with you, but it's good to have it as like a second thing. So I think what is good to have is like your strategy on a page. And what is probably also good to have on a page is your theory of change. And I'm going to show you a document which actually contains those two elements. Okay, this is the 2016 document, which I mentioned in the beginning. So a colleague of mine, actually from Singapore, incidentally, has my favorite definition of strategy. And he says a strategy is a plan to achieve an objective with limited resources. So it has many things in there. It clarifies the objective. It takes into consideration that resources are limited, and it has the element, it's the notion of strategy as a plan. Okay. So this is also the notion I use. A strategy is a plan. Good. So what makes a good strategy? And now I'm going to give you my view, which we've developed within Agility 3, but also in collaboration with someone who does exclusively strategy, because at Agility 3, we don't do only strategy, we also help implement. So when it comes to strategy, I'm also collaborating in terms of methodology development with someone who does exclusively strategy. He does only that. He's been doing strategy for the last 40 years. So we get a bit of inspiration. So some of the slides you see are coming from that end. And I'm using slides because we developed them together. So what makes a good strategy? A good strategy has 4 elements: aspiration, diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent action. And the 3 last things, diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent action, are what we call the kernel of strategy. So that is, a good strategy needs to have those 4 elements. If a strategy does not have one of those, then it's lacking something. But before we go into what good strategy is, let's look at qualities of bad strategies. Okay, so we see a lot of bad strategy out there. There are 4 characteristics of bad strategy. First one is fluff. Second one is lack of reference to challenges. The third one is confusing goals with strategy. And the fourth characteristic of bad strategies are simply wrong strategic goals. So I'm going to go into each one of these a bit more in detail. So what is fluff? Fluff is the superficial reformulation of the obvious. So I give you an example of fluff, okay? And we see that a lot in strategy documents. You can see them, you will recognize them all over the place. So this is from Credit Suisse, who one would believe would have the funds to come up with a decent strategy. And this is what they say. Our strategy is to be a leading asset manager with strong investment banking capabilities. Okay. Now, give me a break. If you remove the jargon, this means our strategy is to be a bank. This is what we mean by fluff. It says nothing, absolutely nothing. It's just a reformulation of something obvious. Now, lack of reference to challenges. This is another thing which we see of bad strategies, okay? This typically sounds like this. The strategy is to increase the company's market share in each market, reduce cost in each business, and therefore increase sales and profits. Well, great, fine. Okay, and what are the strategies? This is an aspiration. It's good. We're trying to do that. This is something we want to do. Who doesn't want to do that? Okay, and this is not a strategy. This is just a wish. And what it lacks is, what are the challenges the organization needs to overcome to be able to achieve more market share, to reduce costs, and to increase sales and profit? What is hindering the organization to do that? Okay, so if challenges are not defined, it's impossible to determine if what the organization is trying to do is actually working. So you cannot assess the quality of a strategy. Okay, then confusing goals with strategy. This is another example. Our strategy is simple and clear. Every time someone says our strategy is simple and clear, and you read something like this, you're probably in the field of bad strategy. Okay, we have the 2020 plan, increase sales by 20% per year and achieving 20% profit margin. These are goals, fine. This is one part of the strategy. It's something you can put into a strategy, but to say that this is your strategy is pure nonsense. It's not a strategy, it's a wish, okay? So if you ask, well, what's the basis for this strategy? You get projection of cost, blah, blah, blah. You have no supporting substance in the form of challenges, opportunities, threats, strengths, weaknesses on which this projection is built. It's just blah, blah, okay? And then we have what we call wrong strategic goals, and the two types of wrong strategic goals. One type of wrong strategic goal is dog dinners objectives. You have these strategies which are just a long, scrambled, messy list of unrelated targets. You have organizations that have 50 strategic priorities. These are not priorities. This is just a list of things we want to do. So this is typically what when I'm thinking of what Joel said, they tried to, this would be an organization trying to pursue every possible opportunity that's out there, okay? And call it everything a priority, even a priority, okay? And then you have blue sky targets. These are long-term visions to where you lack a bridge on how to achieve them. There's nothing wrong with having blue sky targets, okay? I'm against dog dinners objectives, like laundry list. You can also call it laundry list type of strategic objectives. I'm not against blue sky targets, but they're just one element. You can have a long-term vision, and we will come to that, but just by itself, it's not a strategy, okay? And this is something that donors don't like. If the organization says, yeah, we're trying to do this wonderful thing, they say, fine. And how are you going to do this? And what are you trying to achieve long-term, and where you're going to focus? So you're never going to get funding if you go in with just blue sky targets. So now let's come to the 4 elements of good strategy. Good strategy has aspiration, diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent action. We already said that, and that the 3 last are the kernel. These 4 things we can produce in 3 workshops. Okay, we can get clarity about this in 3 workshops. So what is aspiration? Aspiration is the answer to 6 strategic questions. Here we come to another thing about strategy. Strategy is actually answering questions. You go into a strategy process and you just try to answer certain questions. And the questions you answer with your aspiration is, what are your core values? What is your big, audacious, noble goal? That would be your blue sky target if you want. Okay, you can have it, put it in there. I prefer the BANG, big, audacious, noble goal, as opposed to, I don't know if no one knows Jim Collins, you know, BHAG. He has this big, hairy audacious goal. I prefer this version. Okay. Brand promise. What is what the organization is trying to promise? So what is the value the organization provides? Brand promise is more a commercial term. Value is more something you would use in non-profit organizations. Target market is more the commercial term, but who do we serve? Who is the organization serving? Okay, so you need to, an organization always needs to have a sense of who they are serving. Okay, and sometimes you have a person you serve indirectly, but you need to know who is directly benefiting from what you do. Core competency, what are you really good at? And here we have the concept of the 3 uniques. And the 3 uniques, why we call it 3 uniques is 3 things that the organization in combination can do that no other organization can do. Often it's so that other organizations may be able to do 1 of 2 of them, but your organization has these 3 or 4 things that only they can do together. So they may be generic things, but to put together make you unique. And then the 3-year picture. So these are the strategic questions which we try to answer in aspiration. Okay, and this is typically what we would do, or what you can do with your team. This is the first 6 questions you need to answer. Now, I'm going to introduce you to a tool we use to guide the strategy process. We call this the Strategy Execution Planner. This is a strategy document that has evolved over the years, and it's fairly flexible, but in its basic structure, we've kept it since we introduced it 2017, I think. So the other document I'm going to share with you is from 2016. So this is pre, and the SEPL we're using since 2017. So this is the structure of the document. Okay. Do you see the mouse or not? You see the mouse, okay? So you have 2 pages, and it's really, the idea is that you have the strategy on a page. It has on the left side, and this is, if you put it on A4, you can fold it. And then you have your strategy on a page, which is actually an A5 document, folded. You have strategy, core values, bang, brand promise, target market, core competency, and 3-year picture. And then you have top challenges, strategic pillars, and this makes this is the element of your this is the long-term bit of your strategy, as Kevin mentioned. Okay, this gives you direction, and you have a 3-year picture. For example, here, this would be, the future date would be 2024. Where do you want to be in 2024? And then you have on the right side, you have your 1-year plan and quarterly objectives. And that's the structure of the document. Okay. You can do it in this document, or you simply can do it as a 1-page different thing, but this allows you to do it on a page. And it's deliberate because it forces you to limit yourself, because you only have the page. And this literally allows you to put the team on the same page. Okay. So the aspiration is this bit. Okay. So why cannot move now? Now let's get to the kernel: diagnosis, guiding policy, and coherent action. Diagnosis. When you do diagnosis, you describe the current reality. Okay. You link facts to patterns and suggest paying more attention to some issues and to more on others. This is what Joel also said. Is you have many options, and the diagnosis allows you to determine which are the more valuable ones. The diagnosis, the purpose of that diagnosis is to help you deal with this overwhelming complexity of the reality, and you try to simplify your story and draw to attention to the crucial aspects of the reality you're facing. Okay. And it's important because that's the conversation you need to have with your team. From all the things, these are the things that are relevant to us as an organization, okay? With our mission, related to our aspiration. Because depending on what you're trying to achieve, depending on where you want to be in 3 years, your diagnosis will be different. So a clear aspiration is the foundation. And then you can diagnose what's hindering us to get there, okay? And the challenges can be internal or external. So I give you a few examples of external challenges. Shortage of funding, competition for funding, other players in a similar field, policy changes, new political actors. These are typical external challenges that organizations face. Any other challenges, external challenges that your organizations are facing? Just a quick, maybe one or two that you can mention.
Something that comes to mind for us, because we have a particular approach that is networked, would be that others don't want to collaborate with us, maybe because what we set out as our objectives or our goals may not be what they have as priority areas, for example. So then in that sense, the collaboration is not a good match, but they may be the ones that are best placed to carry out the work. So that would mean, for example, for us that we now have like the wrong country or the wrong area that we focused on, and we may need to pivot to a different geographical area, try to find a different partner, a different organization. Like it would throw a lot of our strategy out.
Okay, cool. So this is this is an external thing which you may be able to influence or not. Typically, the external is, we consider external things that you cannot change. So if someone really does not want to collaborate with you, then it's just an external challenge. Now let's get to internal challenges. These are typical things you have under control. Outdated routines. You have some routines that you've been doing, and you've been doing it because we've been doing it, because we've been doing it, because we've been doing it all the time. And they may not serve you anymore. Okay? This is typically as the organization grows organically, you have stuff which you do, and it may not be serving you. Then you have lack of focus. This is a classic one. Organization all over the place. And lack of focus tends also to lead to the next challenge, which is unnecessary complexity. The moment you're trying to pursue too many things, you get with unnecessary complexity. Unnecessary complexity also get, if you have an organization where different people are doing the same thing, supposedly the same thing in different ways, you have unnecessary complexity. Then you have poorly performing or outdated IT systems. That's also classic. You have systems which you use when you start, and at some point of your systems are just not good enough anymore. And then you have skill gaps. It's typical internal challenge. You want to do something, you don't have the skills. You're lacking a particular skill. And sometimes what you also have, and it's amazing how little an organization can be, how small an organization can be to have silos. Sometimes you have an organization with 5 people and you have 3 silos. So this is where you don't have collaboration between teams. Everyone's doing their thing in their way. Okay. And then you have the last, which is just poor, plain old bad management. Okay. Sometimes organizations are really poorly managed. And what I'm sometimes a bit shocked is how and bad management then also leads sometimes to toxic cultures. And to my surprise is that many nonprofits have toxic cultures. And because people are so motivated by the mission of the organization that they have a high tolerance for bad management. And I work with 2 organizations where they had so great people, but management was just horrible. And people tolerate it because they live for what the organization does. Good. So that's the diagnosis. This is what the diagnosis should do. Now, here you see where the diagnosis is in the strategy execution planner. You do the diagnosis process and you get to your top challenges. Okay. Then the guiding policy. What's the guiding policies? The guiding policy specifies how the situation identified in the diagnosis can be managed. It describes how the 3-year picture describing the aspiration can be achieved, taking into consideration the challenges identified in the diagnosis. So you see, it's a very structured process. You're doing one thing at a time. And then you have and then you say, okay, we have the 3-year picture, we have the diagnosis. How are we going to get there? So the guiding policy in the framework we use can be described in form of strategic thrusts with corresponding 1-year goals. Okay. So in the strategy execution planner, you have the guiding principles on the one side, on the left side, on the strategic pillars, and on the right side, on the 1-year, in your 1-year plan. So this is where you see where your long-term links to your short-term. And the guiding policy is like the hinge, where it hinges, where it connects. Okay. What you often see is you have 1-year plans, 1-year objectives, and you look at their strategic pillars and they do not correspond. They're doing things that sound good, but where's the long-term picture? Where's the long-term direction? This is what Kevin said. Well, what's the short-term? What's the long-term? How does this fit together? Okay. So this is the guiding principles allow us to do that. And one mention was have a document where you also always can come back. If you have your guiding principles, you can always come back to these guiding principles. Are we doing what we said we would do? Are we working on these things? Now, coherent action. Coherent action is the third and maybe the most important element of good strategy. And this is something I discovered as I was working with NGOs and also other organizations, that this was not strong enough. That we did the 1-year plan, and then you do the 1-year plan, and then you forget about it. And 1 year later, you say, whoa, let's see what we actually achieved. And at the end of the year, you look back at what you tried to do a year before and hope that you actually did what you were intending to do. It's sometimes people are often management teams are scared about looking back at the years. When you say, okay, what did you try to achieve? What were your objectives at the beginning of the year? And then you have the leadership team so looking at each other and say, whoa. let's hope we don't come up with a big surprise, which often they don't, because these organizations I've been working with, so I have the idea what we're trying to achieve. So surprise is not too bad, because we have this coherent action. Okay. Unfortunately, many organizations stop the strategic process at they say it's strategic, and they stop there. So they say this, our strategic objectives, that's our strategy, and that's not good, because and this is what we believe, that a good strategy must contain action. Okay, a good strategy must contain some sort of action plan. A strategy without action is like a knife that's not sharpened. That's why we call it the sharp end of strategy. It looks like something useful, but it's not. You try to use it, you have this wonderful knife and you're trying to use it, and it's not as useful as it could be, because you've not done the last step. And it's a shame. It's a shame, because you've done all the work, so you need to do it until the end, until your strategy has this sharp end. And the reason why we focus on this sharp end is that we really try to get there, even if the front bits are not perfect. We need to have something that after a period of 4 weeks, the organization is working on something which is coherent. So that's why we call it coherent action. Okay? Because very often you have action which is a lot of action, but it lacks the coherence. And you're wondering, how does it all fit together? Okay. And a very powerful way to coordinate action is to formulate proximate objectives in the form of quarterly objectives and key results or key actions. Let's see how we're doing with time. No, we're not too bad. So this is in the strategy execution planner where you have the coherent action. This is the sharp end of strategy. These are your quarterly objectives. Now, you see that on the strategy execution planner, you have the 4 quarterly objectives. You have the objective for, you don't do all the 4 at the beginning of the year. Verboten. Yeah, because if you do quarterly objectives, all your quarterly objectives at the beginning of the year, you're not doing quarterly planning and you lose flexibility. You do your yearly objectives, and then you fix your focus for the quarter. And you do your quarterly objectives are things you need to be able to complete within the quarter. That gives you your flexibility. That gives you your focus. You're not going to formulate something which is, we're going to be working on that project. You say, in that project, what are we going to finish by then? Okay. So from aspiration to coherent action, how do you get there? You can do this alone. You can do this with help. When you have this presentation, you're likely to be able to do this alone, actually. Okay. But this is what you do. In the first workshop, you do core values, big addition, noble goal, brand promise, target market, core competence, 3-year picture. So in the first workshop, you fill that bit of the strategy execution plan. In the second, this is generally a quite cool workshop. People like that. Yeah, it's looking forward and all wonderful stuff. Okay. The second workshop is where people are really, this is where it gets tough, because people need to agree on stuff, agree on top challenges, agree on strategic thrusts, agree on 1-year goals, and do a strategy consistency check. And we will come into that. Because the strategy consistency check, this is actually the innovative element of what we do, in addition to being a very short process. And then in workshop 3, you do the coherent action. Objectives for the next quarter and key results for each quarterly objective. Okay. Now I'm going to show you something from a project we did, and we're going to stop sharing here, and I'm going to show you the power of this thing. Share the screen, and we're going to options. So this is a tool we use is called Notion. I've been using this only recently. And this is a workshop we did with an organization, 3 workshops over Zoom. And this is workshop 3. This is the outcome of workshop 3, which is, so we have a vision. We have the systemic challenge. You see this, no? We have the mission. So these are the strategic action areas: strategic focus, cultural change, industry change, policy change. Who do we serve? These are values, key differentiators, unique qualities. What are the problems we help solve? 3 to 5 year picture. So you have internal, so they have for internal network programs and initiative, external and financing, they have their 3-year picture. There's a lot of homework between workshops. Let's be honest about this. They did brilliantly. They put a lot of work between workshops. Key challenges, 5 key challenges. So it's interesting, for example, citizen global network volunteer fatigue, remaining relevant and engaged in an increasingly busy and noisy space, public unwillingness to engage in nuanced and complex conversations, Brexit and impact on funding and implementation, structures and planning to reduce overwork due to growth. So that is what the organization identified as their key challenges. So then they went into their programs and projects, which is their strategic thrusts: fashion activism, industry advocacy, policy advocacy, global education, and institutional strengthening. So these were their 5 strategic thrusts. And then they formulated, because we could not go into everything, they formulated one of them, for example, increase operational effectiveness, which is one of the strategic thrusts. They have, this is what it's all about. Why does it matter? What are the key success factors? A few ideas. Then key outcomes until 2021. Objective for the next 90 days. Who should lead and who should be involved. So, and then they continue to do the rest. So let's stop sharing. So you see the power of this thing. Let's see if I can share something else. Let's see where we are on the presentation here. Okay, I'm going to share another document, which is the 2016. Now where is it here? So share. This is the 2016 document I mentioned. Okay. Now you have aspiration. So the aspiration you have here, this is from the Global Detention Project. They do migration. Their field is migration detention, and their aspiration is to ensure that refugees, migrants, and asylum seekers are treated with dignity. So this is the aspiration. What they call the aspiration is actually the big audacious novel goal. This is their big audacious novel goal, and you see this thing is on a page. So this is like the left side of the thing. Aspiration. Then they have the core challenges. We talked about this. This is what they have identified as core challenges. Strategic mission is actually the value they provide. Okay, this is what they're trying to do. So to improve, to encourage, to reinforce, and to promote. This is the value proposition. Okay, core initiatives. These are strategic thrusts. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strategic thrusts. Unique qualities. This is what makes them unique. The research techniques, data development methodology, the rigor. That they are the only resource offering global information and analysis on migration detention, and that they have first-rate team of researchers. I mean, this is an organization which is tiny, but this is what makes them unique. This is, and they got the funding for initial round, so it's something which was successful. Now, they went with 2-year objectives and 4-year objectives because for the reason that they had to produce a 4-year strategic plan. So that's why they went for 4 years and not 3 years. Normally, I would say 3 years and 1 year. So that's their 1-year priorities, and that's their 4-year picture. This is on 1 page. And to come to Julia in this, and then you have the whole wordy document, blah, 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 blah. Sorry to leave it. So you have a lot of words. He's a journalist. He likes to write. NGOs like to write. I don't know why. The nonprofit sector, they love to write. I'm an engineer. I don't like writing. So this is theory. This is their theory of change. This is their strategy. Improve, encourage, reinforce, promote. So they called it a strategy, but this is essentially the value they're providing. This is the output, database, strategic engagement, and collaborative research. This is the outputs they produce. These are the outcomes: increased transparency, enhanced accountability, data-driven advocacy endeavors, and methodology for analysis. And then this is the impact. So this is their theory of change. So you have two things on 1 page: theory of change and strategy. And then you have the unavoidable document with all the words. Okay. But if you have this one, and if you have the theory of change, writing the whole document is much easier. And what you're going to look at is not the long document. You're going to look at the strategy on a page, and you look at your theory of change. And this is something that really needs to be clear for the organization. Any questions to that point? We're good? Stop the sharing and continue with the presentation if you're okay with that. Share the screen, go back to my PowerPoint, and we're going to do this one. From aspiration to coherent action, 3 workshops. These are the tools we use. We use the CEPL, we use the Agile Strategy Board, which I'll introduce now, and then we have the super simple quarterly planner. So these are the 3 tools we use. So let's do this practical work because it's worth doing. Okay. We're not going to do this because I'm looking at the time. Maybe we skip this, but this is something that I'd like. No, let's do the 5 minutes individual work. Okay, just do the 5 minutes individual work, answering this question because it's an important question. If we meet again in 3 years and everything went well, how would your organization look like? take 5 minutes to answer this question. What we won't do is we don't do the 10-minute sharing in breakout, but do it for yourself. Just take a moment, and this is something you can then take back for yourself. So I'll move on now, just to see what sharing insights. Now I'm going to present you the Agile Strategy Board, and the Agile Strategy Board is a tool we use to get some consistency into the strategy. Okay.
Can we please hear those points that everyone has come up with? Like,
say again.
if we got time. Like, I mean, all of the participants were saying that they came up with a couple of points. Can we hear, like, briefly how the organization looks like? If you want to share, go ahead. Not me. I wanted to hear from others.
Yeah. But you can start.
Okay. So for me, like, I think if because we are involved in legal work, and if everything goes well, I think as a common law practicing country, we will have some good precedents for others to follow, and we will have, like, paved the way for others to join us and make inroads in the development practices, invasive development practices. So yeah.
Okay. Joel, what did you come up with? Your bullets?
Yeah, bullet number 1, our lawyers, investigators, and data scientists feel happy about the impact that they're having on reducing climate crime. Our funders and external stakeholders feel the same way. And our organization structures support awareness across the organization. So decision-making is decentralized, collaboration hits the sweet spot, not too much burden, just right, and we're continuously improving.
Mm-hmm. So well on track, so a feeling of being well on track, okay. Kevin?
Thank you. Yes, that leaves me. For me, we will have doubled in scale, which is what we intend. And I think supported by corresponding capability and capacity, and also with resources and an operational infrastructure in place to support the scaled up operations. And that's really where we're looking at. Okay.
So doubling. And Julia, how does your view fit with what Joel has?
I think we both had sort of like internal and external parts to it. So I had written down that we have achieved some impactful outcomes that can be replicated, that we had established a network that worked with us consistently, so that like we have a reputation that people want to work with us, but also that like we are already doing it so that we don't have to start everything from scratch every time. Mm-hmm. And I had written down actually that on the internal side that we have achieved an internal ecosystem, how we work, what tools we use, etc. That like works very well for us, and that we have internal dynamics in the different projects that give us a sense of clarity and what we're working for and where we need to go.
I wish I'd used the word ecosystem.
It's your favorite word, Joel. How could you not use ecosystem?
I know.
That's something I recommend when you do these things. Put a question, let people ponder about it by themselves for a few minutes, and then share. Because if you don't do that, then it's just the first one who talks, and it's especially if you have quiet people who do a bit of thinking, you lose that. That's why when we do this, we will always do this. Think about yourself 5 minutes and then share, and then collect. Cool. So let's do strategy board. Strategy board is a tool we use. It's here you see it, the PowerPoint version, but in fact it's an Excel, just an Excel sheet. So we have challenges and objectives, we have directions, and we have actions. And these are the 3 elements that go into the strategy board. So these are the 3 components of the strategy: diagnosis, guiding principles, and coherent action. And what we do in the board is, when we do the analysis, can be from different sources, we then distill the challenges. Then we have tools to develop the strategic directions. And from the strategic directions, we then have the measures. So This is the fancy way to look at. The less fancy is we have diagnosis, which feeds into the top part of the board. We have the guiding policy, which feeds into the left side of the board. And then we have the coherent action, which comes from the right side of the board. Okay. The board is that what keeps it all together and which ensures that your strategy is consistent. Now, how do you build the board? First, you do the diagnosis, and you have this exercise, the diagnostic exercise, which typically starts with the SWOT analysis. Okay, so you have the SWOT: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and dangers or threats. Very often people stop there and say, "Oh, this is who hasn't done a SWOT analysis." No raise of hands. So everyone has done a SWOT analysis, I guess, no? So what we then do is we go one step further. We do a SWOT, and then we map the elements, the cards we've collected on the SWOT, and we put them into clusters, and we put them on a two-dimensional map on the floor, typically, on two axes: strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and dangers. So this is dangers and opportunities is one axis, and weaknesses and strengths is the other axis. You have this group here, which are opportunities to capture. You're strong, and it's an opportunity. So then we cluster, and each cluster gives you a challenge or an opportunity or something you need to deal with. Okay. 9 is a lot. We try to do less. We try to reduce it to 6 or even 5, but generally the exercise leads to this type of number. Okay. Then you have this here. It's an opportunity and a weakness. If you don't do anything, you just miss an opportunity. But at the moment, you're not. It is something you could capture, but you're not strong. So you would need to build skills. So these are typical things where you're trying to build capacity in order to capture an opportunity. And then you have the left side here, and this is the danger zone, because it's a danger and you're weak. So here, these are your risks. So this gives you fundamentally 3 types of focus areas. And this is how it looks in practice. So you have the cards on the floor, and then you do it, and you see the mapping. They came up with 14 things. And of course, we then try to group them together. Good. Second step is you do the strategic thrusts. And you do this with marketplace, brainstorming, or expert input. The marketplace is where you have these type of things, where you collect ideas, put them together, cluster them, building on your challenges. Okay. So you can do it manually, or you can do it in these type of live formats, or nowadays you have tools like Miro, Idea Board, what's the Mural. So you have these tools where you can do these things remote. I think Joel and Julia, you would not be able to meet, so you could do this with these tools. This is very well possible. So once you have this, you go into step 3, where you check if this thing fits. Okay, so you come up with your challenges, and you come up with your strategic thrusts. So this organization has 8 challenges and 7 strategic thrusts. Now, if you look at this board, what you will see is that there are 2 gaps. Okay, the first gap is that you have a challenge which is not addressed by any strategic thrusts. So you have identified a challenge, but your strategic thrusts are not addressing this challenge. So you have a gap in your strategy. The second type of gap is that you have a strategic thrust which is not addressing any challenge. So why do it? So it's very simple, and this allows you to see if our strategy is consistent. So this strategy is more or less consistent, except of these 2 things. Here, why are we doing this? And here, how do we deal with this? Because there's no strategic thrust doing this challenge. Sometimes when you have a strategic thrust and you don't have a challenge, you can go back and say, did we miss something? So, okay. We won't do strategic work. This is something you could do if you wanted, but we go to step 4 because we're reaching the end of time. Coherent action. Coherent action, what you do, and that's where the action needs to be coherent. For each of the strategic thrusts, you need to do 2 things. You need to fix yearly goals. These are your yearly goals, and then your quarterly goals. So quarterly goals would look like this. For example, this is, you do a stakeholder analysis. This would be a quarterly objective and key results. So this is where it gets really, where your strategy gets really sharp, where you see for each of the quarterly objectives, you define the objectives and then you define the key results. So if you do that, you have a strategy which is, this bit here is actually the sharp end of your strategy, where you have your objectives and you have really the key results or key actions. Difference between key results and key actions is depending on how you lead your people. Okay, some people are led by key actions. I want this done. I want you to have to do this, or I want this outcome. So depending on the maturity of the people you're leading, you're going to lead either with key actions or with key results. So the OKR cycle, objectives and key results. Who's been familiar with this term, objective and key results? Who has heard about this? Yeah, so this is standard, and it's actually quite powerful if you don't overdo it. Okay, so you define your strategic directions, then you define your OKRs, which are your quarterly objectives, and then you check on these every 1 to 2 weeks, and then at the end of the quarter you do a review. So beginning of the quarter, end of the quarter, and then you redefine the objective for the next quarter. As simple as this. And in the annual, you do this. This is your cycle. This is your strategy cycle in a nutshell. And this is the last tool, which is the super simple planner. You have your quarterly objectives, 1, 2, 3 or more. But again, you only have 1 page. So your quarterly objectives, and then for each quarterly objectives, key results. You can do this as a leadership team. And once you have defined it as a leadership team, you can do it down to the teams. You can do this to manage individuals. You can do this to manage teams. You can use this to manage the organization. So to summarize, the sharp end of strategy, which was the title of the presentation, is actually a set of actions or results aligned with challenges and strategic objectives that an organization is committed to achieve over the next quarter. That is the sharp end of your strategy. And with that, I conclude. So this leaves us a bit of time for Q&A, discussion, whatever, or anything that you want to give back to. We lost colleague, we lost Rafa.
Just a quick question, Andreas. Will we get a copy of the presentation by any chance?
Yeah.
Thank you. That's helpful.
To get a copy of the presentation, I cannot share with you the other documents.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you. It's a very helpful tool. I appreciate that.
And you can download the tools on the website. But I will send you the presentation, and I will send you the. No, I'll send you a presentation, and then I will share the tools so you have, including the strategy board.
So maybe just a question, if allows. When you mention the entire process, it refers to the first year or only the first year, right? But let's say we want to do this on a 3 to 5 year, is that process the same? You're just basically then extending it to first, second year, third year, but using the same process? Yeah,
what you do is you do, this is a process, you tend to do, let's say, funding cycles are often 3 to 5 years. So for organizations, they would need to produce this, this big document every 3 to 5 years, depending on where the organization is. So that's the moment where you would do sort of the full thing. You do this once, and then, but as you're doing it, you would just do a quick update of the strategy of the left side, and then the right side. So the first time you do it, it's about 3 times as long as the second time you do it. Because the second time you're just checking. You just check. This has changed. We change this. 3-year picture still the same. No, this moved, and so it's much quicker. But do it every year and do it every quarter. Just don't. But people say, we don't have time to do it every quarter. But you have time to spend a quarter without direction. That doesn't make sense. So do the quarterly thing. Fix your quarterly objectives. Less is more.
And would you have to review the thrust every year? Because I guess everything changes, right? So you have to review some.
You review your thrust every year if they're still consistent. Generally, they don't change. What often happens is you may have one which becomes more important than the other. And what also happens is that on some thrusts, you may not have done anything, but it's on that particular year. Okay. For instance, I have an organization that had a strategic thrust, which was to upgrade their IT infrastructure. So that thrust was more or less done within the first year. However, because the organization was so focused on that, the others suffered, which meant that on the second year, that thrust became less important and maybe even became obsolete because it was done. So yes, often an organization needs to get certain things done before they can do others. So you can leave the thrust in, but you can consider it completed. And you may not have a strategic 1-year objectives to it because you say it's, well, you want to say something?
Yeah. First of all, the thing at the front of my mind is I think it's such a nice process to have watched, sort of unravel over the last, sort of 80 or so minutes. It really was a pleasure just to follow the logical reasoning behind it. Another, sort of image that's coming to mind is I can imagine, from a triple CA context, the first time we do this is just going to be hard work, rewarding, very worthwhile, but it is hard work. And I could see how we'll learn during that process. So the second time we do it, or whatever cycles, we keep repeating certain aspects on, we'll learn, we'll get better at it, and we'll adapt accordingly. So it won't be hard work forever, but I can certainly see or sense the value add that this will bring us if we can find a way to learn how to execute this process. So for me, a very, very sort of positive experience over the last hour and a half.
Thank you very much. This is what the organization also experience. That it's hard work, but it's worthwhile work. Especially if they get it to the point where they have something, where they get it to this quarterly thing, where they don't give up before, because then they do the year working on that, and then do the yearly review is so rewarding. It's so rewarding.
Mm.
And especially because you're gonna do the first review after 3 months. And already after 3 months, you feel, hey, we're actually doing what we plan to do. We're actually working on those things. We're actually making some progress. So we're done.
One question. Sorry. I was just wondering, like I was thinking of the SWOT analysis, for example, and the way our leadership team is structured is that we have sort of the person in charge of each of the projects is part of the leadership team.
Yeah.
And they are very different thematically. So I was wondering how having very differently thematic areas may play into the SWOT analysis, because our strengths may be different, or should we aim to sort of make it abstract enough that we can sort of label it as strength or a weakness or whatever organization-wide?
You collect strengths and weaknesses, and everyone brings this from their perspective.
Okay.
What happens is that you have the strengths and weaknesses, and then you come up with something which may apply in different areas. Okay, so you may have something which is specific to one aspect of the organization, and then what you need to make sure is that your strategic thrusts may actually be very linked to the individual work area. So that is also then very much linked to your strategy, to your theory of change. So it comes out naturally. No need to worry too much about that. People bring in their perspectives from where they stand, bring it in, and then you get the picture. That's why you do this always first. You do the exercise, strengths and weaknesses. Everyone needs to do their own thing, and they think about, and naturally they will bring in it from their perspective. Don't try to force people to do the abstract. That emerges naturally.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the little, like if I look at the post-its, for example, exercises that you were doing, everyone would sort of have their own post-it, but then perhaps you may start grouping them under a sort of more common umbrella if they are aligned or something like that. Okay.
Exactly. And this is the cool thing when you do this in Miro or Mural, you can start moving them. Okay, and say, oh, this is actually the same. This is similar. This is very specific. This may be more something which is really so specific that we don't even need to deal with it at the corporate level or at the top level, because it's really just a local thing. No, this is something which is a challenge for the whole organization.
That's very helpful.
I mean, you cascade these things. So this process you can also do for a subunit.
Yeah, I was thinking exactly that we maybe something we want to do even at the project level, especially because they're so different, and also because in our organizational structures, one of the things that we want to make sure we have is a way to implement also like bottom up. So we want the projects to tell us what is it that they like. You know, everybody has the space to feed into what the strategies look like and how the organization works. So that's also like a good way that, like, you know, everyone can get involved in what their project looks like. What do they think that are the strengths and the opportunities, the challenges, etc.
Absolutely. Another sort of quick and dirty approach you can do this is when you do this with a team or when you do this with a group, you will not use the whole elements of the aspiration. Okay, but you can say, where do we want to be in 3 years? You start with 3 years, challenges, thrusts, 1 year, and quarter. And you can even start backwards. Okay, so you can say, well, what are we actually doing now? So you can, because you have this format which is just on a page, you fill it like a crossword. You fill the bits and pieces that you have. So if you're actually doing something, by all means, start putting them in. This seems to be our priority for the quarter. So why are we doing it? What yearly goal is this supporting? Is this supporting any quarterly objective? Is this supporting any aspiration? So the fact of having this in front of you, you can even sit down with a glass of wine and start sketching it.
Sure.
It's absolutely wonderful, and I should be doing it more myself, which I actually do. I have, I don't have it here. So I what I do at the beginning of the month, I take one of these workbooks. I don't have the latest in front of me, but I do this, and then on the first page, I do my SUSI plan, my super simple planner. So I have these 5 boxes. I have 5. I say, Andreas, you have 5 boxes for priorities for the quarter. What's it gonna be? And it takes me often about a week or two to try to do it at the end of the quarter. So I have it. And then I use a friction thing, which allows me to erase stuff. Okay, well, see, well, actually, this action does make sense. Okay, I erase it. So I don't have stuff which is there. That brings us back to the flexibility. Okay, this is, I'm opening my thing. Sure. So this is Q3 2021. Okay, this is the cop. So I take the workbook and then I kill it. I just scan it. So this is the first page, and this is the second. Okay. So this was a revenue target I had, implement the sales system, dissertation completed, office cleaned up, and I did not get my weight below 86 kilo. So this is my thing, and then I start doing. Sometimes, I mean, what is typical is you will not achieve all your objectives, but at least you know what you wanted to do.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andreas. It was really excellent presentation. I got inspired myself, a non-profit builder, going to think about the quarterly objectives and inspirational goals. Thank you so much, everybody, also for participation. That was really great to share insights. And yeah, thank you so much. Feel free to also to book a call with Andreas if you want to follow up or some support or help. And so we're looking forward to seeing you on the coming sessions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. See you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.